Welcome everyone. I am here with another session of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And I'm still working on week 1. This is day 3. And I'm exploring core negative beliefs with my friend Tracy.
Hi.
And Tracy and I met because she came to one of my creative writing workshops at Colorado Free University. And she wanted to write. And I said, okay, well, I'll give it a try. So she came to some of my other workshops and she wrote some really funny, short flash fiction stories. And then one day she says, I think I'll try writing a novel. And so, yeah, she kept coming. And how long did it take you to write the first draft?
Oh, maybe less than a year to write that first draft. Maybe nine months, like having a baby.
And then what happened after that?
Then after that, it was a lot of time of going back and rewriting and getting some feedback from people and more rewriting or adding to, taking out. It's a lot of editing time. I think the first part of it is probably where you get to just put down all your thoughts when you first do it. And then you have to make sure that it's readable.
And I'm guessing that was about 5 years because I remember you.
Right. It took a while. And there were times that I stopped doing it, where I hit a point where I would stand still. And sometimes that lasted for a couple of months. And eventually I got back into it.
Did you have any fears along the way?
Well, certainly, because I took from people's lives and I wondered how people would feel if they recognized a piece of them in my story. But I think it's natural that you get your inspiration from real life. And also, I wondered if someone would read it someday and be very critical of it and make me feel bad about what I've done. And I just wondered if I could ever finish it. And there was a lot of fears. Yeah.
So since we're on core negative beliefs right now, do you want to talk? I'm willing to share what mine are.
I'd like to hear what yours are.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to share what some of the things that Julia Cameron says. Negative beliefs. Artists are drunk. Yeah. Crazy. Oh, yeah. Broke. Yes. Irresponsible. I have mixed feelings about that.
Right.
Because I think anyone who can actually create something has got to have some kind of discipline within.
You have to be persistent.
Yeah. Yeah. They're loners sometimes, yeah.
Well, you have to work alone to do your work, and then you work for, if you want to call it work, it's also a lot of fun, but you are alone for probably a couple, 2 to 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
Depends on how long you decide you want to spend.
Yeah. Promiscuous? Yes, I've done that.
I have no comment about that.
Okay. Doomed? Sometimes we probably feel that way. Unhappy sometimes, yes.
I think that's normal you go through a lot of emotions when you're writing, and when you are, your subconscious comes out when you're writing. And so you're going to have unhappy thoughts as well as happy thoughts. So that's natural.
Yeah. And they're born, not made. That's one thing. I never had that core limiting belief that artists, well, actually, now that I look back, maybe there was a time when maybe that was a little bit in my thinking, because I remembered looking at people who were really successful in creative careers and thinking that like they had some magic fairy dust that was sprinkled on them when they were born.
And I think you actually have taught me that that's not true.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of putting pen to paper and really not being afraid,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get rid of that self-consciousness, and have fun with it.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of, I think that's one of the big core limiting beliefs, is that you're not worthy of doing this work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, maybe I was able to get over that because I had such an intense drive to write. And I would say, this is true for a lot of my creative expression, but particularly with writing, I had such an intense drive that I had to push through that. And because I persevered and I would, read books, I would take workshops, I would put my work out there in writers groups, and I taught creative writing, and now I'm working on Masters of Fine Arts in creative writing because I wanted it so badly.
And that certainly showed with how you've done your workshops. You've got a wealth of knowledge, and also I think you have a great way of being gentle with those of us who have a lot of those fears about writing. I mean, you can name a lot of fears that a person could have, and you're lucky you don't have that, but so much, right?
Well, I think to some degree, I do have a lot of courage, but so I would say probably my primary core belief had to do with not so much the creative writing. I think it had more to do with wanting to be an entrepreneur, and particularly in the area of life transformation, because I would say my primary core limiting belief around that was that the market's saturated. There are already enough motivational speakers, there are already enough inspirational speakers. What do I have to say that's so valuable? They've already said it all. And that was a way of keeping myself small.
Well, you do have a lot to say, and you've said a lot of it to me. Over time, I would say that we all have something important to say. We all bring a different experience from our lives that creates a wisdom that we have that is beneficial to all of us. I would encourage you to never give up on your fantastic work.
Thank you. Thank you. But I still wanted to share a little bit more about core beliefs, and I want you to share yours. So for myself, I had this idea. I worked as a paralegal, and that was a good career. It was prestigious and was well compensated. But I would also say I was in a gilded cage. I had the golden handcuffs because and then when that's one side of the coin, and then when you line it up with the other side of the coin, which is all the fear and core negative beliefs, it's really hard to break free of that. And so I guess what I thought was like, there aren't too many paralegals in the world, but there are too many motivational speakers, and that's what I think is so strange. Like who decided that there's supposed to be a certain number of paralegals in the world and there aren't enough, but there's only supposed to be a certain number of motivational speakers, doing transformational work. There's already enough.
Well, and if you want to, talk about my experience is not as a speaker, but as a writer, that, you could say there's too many books in the world.
Right.
So there's no room for another book.
Yeah.
And I think if you take on that attitude, then it's hard for you to write that first paragraph.
Yeah.
I think you have to erase that attitude from your way of thinking.
Yeah, I agree. So if anyone out there is watching this, which we hope you are.
Yeah, you should watch this.
I guess I would sum this up by saying that there's no such thing as too much creativity in the world. I really don't think so. If every single human being has their own unique expression, and you just have to put that out there into the world. And if you don't, then that particular form of creative expression will never be seen again, because there will never be another you. And, and that goes back to the idea of self-worth, and when you talk about it like from this rational perspective, it seems so absurd that we would even think, like, how could we think that whatever we have to offer the world isn't worthy? And yet somehow we must have got that message when we were children. Now, I think the way I got it was because I particularly, when my parents divorced when I was 4, and my mom was like 23 years old, raising 2 small children, and she was a dental assistant, which was a reasonably good job, because I think that's a paraprofessional job as well. And yet, we were in financial struggle all the time. Plus, my mom being young, it wasn't easy. She didn't necessarily have the psychological foundation for what she was trying to do, raise 2 children on her own. And I think I got a message in my head that work is equated to pain and suffering. And so whenever there's a financial transaction, someone is going to suffer. If someone's giving me compensation, then I have to suffer for it. Or if I'm loving my work, like I enjoy it so much, it's like play. How could I ask somebody else to give up their hard-earned money to pay me to do something I love? That was probably one of the biggest core negative beliefs I had, was that I didn't deserve any kind of compensation for doing something that I loved, that somehow that was wrong. And but the thing is that that's based in fear and scarcity.
Yeah, there are a lot of fears in there.
Yeah.
Do you still feel those fears, or?
No, I don't. And I think part of the reason is because I no longer associate these things of work, money, compensation, reciprocation, and all of these things with pain. I no longer make those associations. And I think part of the reason is because what I really came to in my own spiritual evolution was a realization that what we do in the world doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor, if you're a garbage collector, if you work at Target and put stuff on the shelves, if you're, cashier, receptionist, secretary, a lot of jobs that I think I would consider part of the working class. You don't necessarily have to get a degree to do those jobs. But at the same time, that doesn't, some we think, well, maybe being a doctor is better. I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's all equal. And, spirit doesn't judge based on money. Spirit has no understanding of money. So spirit isn't thinking that we're better because we're a doctor and we're making more money. Spirit doesn't care. On that level, it's all equal. What matters is what's happening on the energetic level. And when I realized that, I was able to contribute in all sorts of ways. And maybe some ways I would say I would enjoy more than others, they're coming more from my heart. But on another level, it's all the same. Externally, it's all the same. Right. It's only internally where is our soul energetically existing in the world. And so you could work, for example, at Target and be, like a Zen monk, and just smiling and interacting with the other spiritual beings coming into that place. We're all just having an experience on this physical plane. And when I reached a point where I was no longer in judgment about myself or other people, it took away that association with pain. And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, there are lots of people out there who are perfectly happy to give me money. So they're not going to judge me and say, well, she enjoys her work, so I don't think I should have to pay her. They,
Right.
they actually feel the complete opposite. They realize that I've put a lot of effort into
They
building my
appreciate
skills.
your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And also now with that kind of attitude, I think you can also feel more freedom to be creative.
yeah. It's just huge to let go of all that crummy judgment that I had inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, that's, I think, what I talked about before in terms of the shadow and these core limiting beliefs is like I like to use the term lead.
Mm-hmm.
It's this thick, gunky junk, energetic junk
Mm-hmm.
that we have to work through. And it's like your pipe is clogged, and you have to get it unclogged. And it doesn't necessarily happen overnight. I'm not saying it can't happen overnight. Anything's possible. But usually, it takes a dedication, a commitment to persevering through working with that material and transforming it, turning it into power.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel much more empowered now and enjoying life more. I feel happier too.
Good. I'm happy for you.
Thank you. Anything else you wanted to share about?
Well, are we still talking about creativity too, or I just wanted to add that being creative is fun, and that's the one thing that I think you are now free to do, having let go of a lot of fears in your life, that you're now much more able to enjoy your creativity.
Yeah. And one of the things that you were saying earlier was about how creative expression is a need.
Yes, I very much feel that it's maybe not the need of having to eat or have a home, but it is a strong need in us to create. And creating can be done in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be just writing or painting. It could be how you put the furniture in your house, actually.
Yeah.
But I really feel that it's an outlet that I need to have. And I have enjoyed doing that through writing.
Yeah, and also, I remember you were saying, like, maybe it's not as important as food or shelter. And I was thinking about Picasso and Van Gogh, because there was a time when Picasso was living in Paris and he was painting, and he was so broke that he had to make a choice between buying paint or buying food.
Yeah.
And so he would buy paint. And that's actually the reason for certain, periods in his career that they call the blue period or the rose period. The reason for that was because he didn't have any money to buy paint. And so if all he had was blue, he painted with blue. If all he had was rose, he painted with rose. Yeah. And also he would paint images of food, because he'd spend his money on paint. He didn't have money for food, so he would paint pictures of food.
So his need was great. His need for creating was great.
Yeah.
I can see that. Well, I mean, some of the negative beliefs, I think they say if you're going to be creative, then you're going to be neglecting your family, and it's certainly not a priority. But I think you can have time for both, and it's important to your health, I think, to be able to express yourself. So.
Yeah, and going back to Van Gogh as an experience in housing, I think I recall reading that at a time he would actually sleep in a barn because he was so broke, because he was so dedicated to his creative expression that he was willing to sleep in a barn.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why a lot of his paintings are of those rural areas, out there in the south of France.
Or cornfields or some kind of fields.
Yeah. So,
What were you going to say about Picasso? Did you have something?
yeah,
to
just
say?
about how his need for creative expression was actually more important than his need for food.
Really.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah. So, well, I think that pretty much concludes this video. And
Okay.
as usual, I would appreciate if you would subscribe to my channel, click like to this video, ring the bell for notifications, and add comments, particularly about your own journey through core negative beliefs. If you've been able to identify some, if you're still struggling, or if you've overcome some, I would love to hear your stories in the comments. And I hope you'll join us again for the next video. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.